The Magic Kettle. This story is from Japan. Right in the middle of Japan, high in the mountains, an old man lived in his little home. He was very proud of his little home. He never tired of admiring the white straw mats and the pretty papered walls, which in warm weather could be slid back to let in the fragrance of the trees and the flowers. One day he was standing looking at the mountains opposite his home when he heard a rumbling noise behind him. He turned around, and in the corner he beheld a rusty iron kettle, which looked like it had not seen the light of day for many a year. How the kettle got there the old man could not figure out, but he picked it up and looked it over carefully, and when he found that it was quite whole, he cleaned off the dust and took it to his kitchen. "This is a piece of luck," he said, smiling to himself. "A good kettle is expensive, and mine is leaking water." Then he took the old kettle off the fire, filled the new one with water, and put it in its place. No sooner had the water become warm than a strange thing began to happen. First, the handle of the kettle gradually changed into a head, and the spout gradually turned into a tail. And then from the body sprang 4 paws, and at last the kettle was not a kettle, it was a living creature. In Japan it is known as a tanuki. The tanuki jumped off the fire and bounded out of the room and up the walls and down the ceiling. The poor man was in agony lest his beautiful little home be destroyed. He cried to a neighbor for help. Together they managed to catch the little troublemaker and to shut it up safely in a wooden chest. Quite exhausted, they sat down and began to discuss what they should do with this little creature. At length they decided that it should be sold. They stopped a child who was passing by and asked him to send them a tradesman called Jimmu. When Jimmu arrived, the old man told him that he had something that he wanted to sell. He lifted the lid off the wooden chest, but to his surprise, there was no tanuki, only an old kettle. It was very odd, but he remembered what had happened the night before, and he did not want to keep the kettle in his house any longer. So, after a little bargaining, Jimmu went away carrying the kettle. Jimmu had not gone far before he felt the kettle getting heavier and heavier. By the time he reached home, he was so tired that he could barely put it in the corner of his room. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by a loud noise in the corner where the kettle stood. He raised himself up to see what it was, but nothing was there except the kettle. The kettle seemed to be quiet enough. He thought he must have been dreaming, and he fell asleep again, only to be awakened a second time. He jumped up and ran to the corner, and by the light of the lamp that he always kept lit, he saw the kettle had become a tanuki, which was running around chasing its tail. When it grew weary of chasing its tail, it began doing somersaults down the hallway out of pure joy of life. The tradesman was very much troubled as to what to do with this little creature. It was nearly morning before he got any sleep, but when he finally opened his eyes, there was no tanuki, only an old kettle. As soon as he tidied up his house, Jimmu set off to tell his story to a friend next door. The man listened quietly and did not appear to be as surprised as Jimmu thought he would be. The young man explained that he had heard in his youth a story of a magic kettle. "Go, travel with it, display it," he said. "You will become rich. But first, you must obtain the tanuki's permission. It would also be wise to have some magic ceremonies done to prevent the tanuki from running away at the sight of people. Jimmu thanked his friend for his advice, and he followed the advice exactly. The tanuki's consent was obtained, a booth was built, a notice was hung up outside inviting the people to come and witness the most wonderful transformation that was ever seen. They came in crowds. The kettle was passed from hand to hand. They were allowed to examine it all over and even to look inside. Then Jimmu took it, set it on the platform, and commanded it to become a tanuki. In an instant, the handle became a head, the spout a tail, and the four paws appeared at the side. "Dance," said Jimmu, and the tanuki danced. It did all of its steps, moving from one side to the other, till the people could not stand still any longer themselves, and they began to dance. Gracefully the tanuki led a fan dance, and glided without pause into a shadow dance and an umbrella dance, and it seemed as if it might dance forever, and very likely it would have, if Jimmu had not declared that the tanuki had danced enough and the booth was to be closed. Day after day the booth was so full that it was hardly possible to enter it, and what the neighbor foretold came to pass. Jimmu was a very rich man. Yet he did not feel happy. He was an honest man, and he thought that he owed some of this wealth to the man who had sold him the tanuki. One morning he put 100 gold pieces in the kettle, and he carried it to the old man who had sold it to him. "I have no right to keep it any longer," he added when he told his story, "so I have brought it back to you. Inside you will find 100 gold pieces that I have put there as the price for my rent." The man thanked Jimmu, saying that few people would have been as honest, and the kettle brought them both luck. Everything went well and all prospered for both of them, and they died at a very ripe old age, and they were well loved and respected by everyone.